I just watched your talk, and it was very encouraging, and yeah, I really enjoyed learning more about you through your presentation. Let's talk on let's work our way backwards from Let's Play. So what did you do?
I invited the audience to think about how we can play more interesting games on the infrastructure that we're building in crypto specifically, that sort of allows us to transcend beyond, I would say, the traditional power structures of the world that we have been born into without being asked. Like I was born in Germany, so it was a very particular setup, but it was one of these Western type democracy countries. I had totally stable currency. I had no problems at all that relate to what cryptocurrency tries to solve, in a sense, which when I got into crypto very early, it was all about remittances, solving remittances and getting rid of Western Union. That was never my reality that I had to deal with. So, but nonetheless, I think everybody in their own way has realized that the systems we were born into have limitations. And I think what brought us together in crypto initially was this idea of, hey, we could actually leverage this decentralization tech to play entirely new collaboration games globally, right? We could run platforms like Uber and Airbnb without an intermediary, which sounds like an amazing coordination game, and in the old century might have been done as a cooperative, but in the new world of crypto it might be a DAO, which just might be a digital cooperative if you want, right? So that is what brought us together. I think that has been sort of forgotten a little bit now. Now that crypto is really this sort of fintech revolution type technology, where we see new banking apps and new ways to tokenize the security and the blah blah. So it becomes the fintech revolution and the rails of fintech 2.0 revolution. But why have we actually started doing it? And also, in a sense, what has given us that insane legitimacy in the early days that allowed us to grow from niche to really big? I think crypto specifically has been surfing on a wave of moral truth, in a sense. Like, remittances are bad if people pay upwards of 20% if they already have nothing. And all these things are true, and I think that is what drew a lot of people to the space originally and gave it that gravitas and importance, social importance. For me as a lawyer, for example, it opened me doors to the politicians in Germany and Europe, and being able to tell them how they should regulate this technology. Not that they necessarily did it, but I had the opportunity to tell them. It was perceived as important. And I think it all came from some kind of deep moral truth. And now I think we've lost sight of that, and I wanted to sort of invite everybody to sort of think about, okay, now that we have reached these digital rails, what are we playing now together to move forward as a society? That's maybe the TLDR of the talk.
Understood. And I was happy to see that on one of your slides you mentioned it's not about the tech. You had 4 points, I think, in there. And in my work, I speak to a lot of people in DeFi and crypto, typically. I'm looking for that community, that cultural sort of, those narratives that are built amongst those different tribes. And I'm curious, sort of, you think the collectives or the people, groups of people up to this point, you said you've been around for 10 years in this space, were orbiting primarily around the tech. It was primarily geeks, and now it's time to move to the next wave, which is this social layer.
Yes. So it's exactly right. I think it was. I actually had a really good tweet about this one that I'm trying to remember, but I think it's an evolution. Yeah, I think it's the following evolution. It started with the blockchain networks itself, right? The settlement layer that was built first. Bitcoin was the first one, then Ethereum followed. The second was sort of the economic rails, the plumbing, the financial plumbing. So being able to on-ramp with fiat, having a DEX, swapping tokens, intra-chain, cross-chain, all these things. That's sort of the second phase of crypto. And now we're entering into its third phase, and that is the institution building. An institution, from sort of a most abstract definition, just means the rules of the game. That's what institutions really are. And they are defined by law, they're defined by code, they're defined by social norms. And I think we're now in crypto's institutional phase. It's still early. We're obviously at a, people are still hating on VCs for investing only in infrastructure games. So VCs are still thinking about, oh, we're in phase 2, we're building financial primitives, blah, blah. But really the narrative, also, or I think the sentiment is already there, where we're now talking about crypto's institutional layer. Network states are one sort of very apparent, evolution of that, where people are trying to build states, which are a collection of institutions around social security, taxes, employment stuff. But yeah, I think since we're now in the age of AI, AGI, and all this stuff, we need to think much bigger. I think just reproducing the idea of a state, for example, with network states, is almost like boringly unambitious. It's like, no, we're probably not going to reproduce states when we have AGI. How are we actually going to live? And so I want to, really ask these questions because I feel it's very timely. I think we're not really projecting the right timelines at the moment when we just think about the AI track, right? So, yeah.
And you also mentioned up to this point, it's been largely people building companies trying to utilize these technologies to build new, I guess, more efficient companies, less bureaucratic, perhaps, but when you put everything inside protocols and automate away a lot of that, blockchain has made many promises over the years, right? Especially for accounting and even legal. Are we seeing any of those shifts from what are traditionally corporate structures into these DAO or these new kind of cooperative organizations? Are there real world examples operating, functioning now?
So a bunch of thoughts on this. Number one is that in the talk I quoted Chomsky, who talked in the 70s about this idea of anarcho-syndicalism as this free association of people. They do whatever they want, and among them they incorporate economic institutions and create, commercial relationships. So I feel DAOs are sort of the expression of that is true. In a sufficiently advanced technological society, such as the one we are already in, people can actually do that. And the medium where they can do that in 2024 are DAOs. That's where you can freely associate and create entirely new economic institutions. And if you stay anon, there's no limit to what you can do, right? You might have then legal problems if you're not anon and you're doing this, whatever, you're trying to sell some shit to retail investors. Then, of course, you're facing legal problems. But if you're doing it among yourselves and whatever, nobody cares what you're doing, right? So I feel we already are sort of there, but it's unguided, undirected, and very niche still. I think we see the emergence of on-chain organizations as a sort of more recognized now, field. Where we could very much see, as a lawyer, I see a lot, obviously, that's happening, and I see very interesting things such as, taking a Web2 company and turning it into a DAO, and you do it because there are actual efficiencies in turning a corporate network into a public network, making everybody be able to suddenly build on that public network, and then actually capture value at different levels of that stack. And you actually have a much bigger pie from which you now capture value as a former corporate, now maybe a digital public good, maybe now your users are your stakeholders, which are your shareholders. So really different setups, but potentially much bigger, right? Ethereum could be the first, not $1 trillion thing, but whatever comes after trillion, sort of the next power law, so to speak, could be created with these on-chain structures, I think.